Good evening, everybody, and welcome to my presentation on the SMART approach for water supplies. And I'm going to present to you some findings from an assessment that's just been completed. So it's really a pleasure to be a presenter for today's WASH debate. And I'm especially excited to present on the subject of self-supply and market-based approaches. My own experiences observing and working with rural dwellers who have been investing in their own services started 20 years ago. And that was when I was living and working in Uganda. And it was clear that people were taking advantage of tapping the rain that fell onto the rooftops. They were catching it with whatever containers they had. And over time, NGO projects, including those funded by government, came in and started to support masons and local enterprises to really enable people to have higher service levels with rainwater and encouraging people to invest. And if you contrast the two images on the left with kind of really informal rainwater collection with the image on the right, which shows a couple with a 6 cubic metre tank that they've invested in themselves, you can see what a difference it can make. And over the years, I've really witnessed how investments in water supplies by households are not just confined to rainwater. Drilled boreholes, particularly manually drilled boreholes, improved dug wells, they're all examples of technologies that some people can make their own investments and upgrade their supplies. And as a disclaimer of my own, I really actually argue that the 3 T's, tariffs, taxes and transfers, simply do not do justice to actual expenditures in neither water supply nor in sanitation. And we really need to consider household capital investment much more seriously and separately. And in the paper that Guy Hutton and I prepared, we called for consideration of high and the 3 tiers, trying to give a catchy name, which is sadly not caught on. But let's look beyond the 3 T's to household investments. And so, with great delight, late 2021, I took on the task of leading the completion of this assessment. It was funded by DGIS and really set out to determine the potential of the SMART approach in reaching SDG 6 and other SDGs. If you look at the map up on the right, it shows the 8 countries that were covered by the assessment, all with different experiences of poverty, food insecurity, hunger, population densities. But in all of those countries, at least 30% of rural dwellers are living below the national poverty line. And you can find out more about the country contexts in the report, which looks at that. In terms of methodology, the assessment comprised an extensive document review, primary data collection, and key informant interviews. So what is the SMART approach? Well, SMART stands for simple, market-based, affordable, repairable technologies. And the SMART approach has 3 principles: the use of innovative technologies, training of the private sector, and supporting self-supply. The focus is on local production, local materials, and family-based management, and really trying to reduce costs and scale up options for community and household investments at family level. I've already talked about some of the smart techs, and you can see a couple of pictures there as well. So what were the key findings? Well, the SMART approach is contributing to SDG 6, and such a market-based approach can provide safe water that's located at or close to people's homes. Now, this figure takes a bit of getting used to, but it shows the walking distance of users before and after new rope pumps had been installed. And if you look at Zambia, the figure that I have here, the green bars show the situation before the rope pump installations and the black afterwards. And what you see is a big shift from the right to the left of the graph of many more people having much shorter distances to cover for their water supplies because they have water at the home or near to the home. So for example, there are 67 people who have water supplies within 10 metres afterwards, and there were none before. And the number of people with more than a kilometre has shifted tremendously. It's also important to remember that, or to recognise that privately owned wells are actually very often shared. Sharing's the norm, certainly in Tanzania and Zambia. And the survey showed us that, in fact, one privately owned rope pump would actually serve 41 people, not just one family in Zambia. The report also provides insights into the different impacts of households experienced by women, children and family as a whole when they have access to water supply much closer to the home, to these household sources. And it shows what people do with their time and money that's been saved from no longer having to go so far. But also another key aspect is that these supplies have also boosted rural incomes for some of the owners. And this graph here shows that for those 35% of rope pump owners who claim that their businesses have more revenue, have more income, they have more income as a result of rope pumps installed. So you can basically see that, it's not only improving water supply for drinking, but it's also improving water supply for productive activities. And there's an economic value attached to that. You can see the figures in the report also for Tanzania. Another finding is that the smart centres have an impact. It's a significant impact, but it's very localised. And you can see that from the map here showing the work of Jacana, the outputs of the enterprises that Jacana in Zambia has been working with and training and supporting in eastern Zambia. And also, we found that official recognition of self-supply and targeted subsidies would both likely be vital to scale the impacts and reach households that would be served last through other service delivery mechanisms. Now that's a bit of a mouthful of a sentence, and I'll explain it a little bit better with the graph here. But this graph, which is again taken from Jacana, shows the mix of partly sponsored wells and fully paid for wells, paid for by the owners. The red is the partly sponsored. And there's a whole process of, over time, people adjusting, investing in the technology, and also the need to support poorer homes to access those household services. So recognition and subsidies are really important. And we also found that the smart approach, it really has potential for much wider impact, but it's constrained by low levels of funding and staffing and insufficient working partnerships within the countries that they're working. So what else? Well, a big finding that came out, particularly from the interviews with stakeholders, key informant interviews, is really that negative attitudes towards self-supply, as well as misconceptions in the international community, really undermine the efforts of the smart approach and limit the impact of other market-based approaches. And so if you look at this chart on the right, which shows water quality findings from the assessment, this is water quality from rope pumps that have been drilled within the last 2 years. You see that 74% have 0 fecal coliforms per 100 millilitres and 17% have 5 or less. And, what's your attitude to that? Do you think, oh, yeah, well, it's a one-off, or, oh, but piped could be better, or, oh, it's not really good enough? What are the attitudes that you have towards these lower tech solutions that self-supply offers? And so finally, the key recommendations. One kind of overarching conclusion is that market-based approaches isn't simple, it's not easy. It needs thought, it needs time, it needs to be done well. And if you read the report, you'll find all sorts of nuances about some of the pitfalls and challenges. However, really going forward, it's such an opportunity to sit along other service delivery approaches. And we ask the Dutch Foreign Ministry of Foreign Affairs to really consider direct or indirect financing to scale up market-based approaches for rural WASH, and to reflect and challenge some of these negative attitudes and misconceptions about self-supply within the water supply sector, and invest in the development of evidence and policy dialogue. Discussions like these are great, of course, debates. And then for the smart centres, you've also got homework. And we really ask you to invest in proof of concept, awareness raising, developing your programmes and improve the working partnerships with others. And consider broadening those 3 pillars to 5, adding policy engagement and monitoring alongside technology, private sector training and the supporting self-supply and encouraging household investment. Also, strengthen the monitoring to track outcomes and the use of data, which you can use for advocacy. And strengthen the sharing of experiences across the Smart Centre group and with others. Here's the bibliography. Here's the link also to the report if you want to download it. And thank you. Thank you very, very much for listening.